I used to farm in Montana, and there's a lot of characters in Montana. And I met this old timer once, and he was telling me that the Department of Labor came out to his ranch one day, and they cornered him, and they said, "Yeah, we want to know exactly who's working here and what they're getting paid, and so on." So he starts going down the list, and he tells them about the ranch hand that makes $600 a week plus room and board, and then the cook that makes $500 a week. And he says, "Oh yeah, and then there's that other guy that we got this half-wit. He probably does 90% of the labor around here, puts in about 90 hours a week, and I think we pay him about $10 a week, but he gets a bottle of whiskey every Saturday." And so this guy, he perks up instantly. It's like, "I got to talk to that guy. Where is he? Where is he?" "Oh, you're looking at him." So today you get to hear from the half-wit. So anyway, I guess I was invited to speak because we've done quite a bit of liming in the last 6 years or so. And you might wonder about the title of my presentation here, but back in 2010, my wife and I went to Washington, D.C., did some touring around, and at that time we had been here in Idaho for about a year and a half, and we're realizing that we had acidity problems that we didn't ever have to deal with in Montana. And so when we were touring George Washington's farm called Mount Vernon, we noticed that his agronomy records included lime application. In 1750, they had figured out that liming was beneficial for their soil, and they called it a soil sweetener. Back then, in the absence of synthetic fertilizers, lime was one of the few things they could do, in addition to crop rotation, and allowed them to be successful. So I've been no-tilling since about 2005 in Montana on 2 different farms there, and then when we came here, I decided that it should work here too. So, and I neglected to mention, we farm south of Troy in Idaho. It's very wet and cold springs, and what we found was that after 5 years of no-till, our soils weren't responding like we thought they should. We were getting more and more anaerobic, cold and wet in the spring. We couldn't get in to get things seeded, and we were actually experiencing a lot of compaction. And it wasn't necessarily mechanical compaction from driving over it. It was just because our soil was devoid of structure. And so we had a lot of different well-defined compaction, horizontal compaction layers, and our crops couldn't root down, especially when things got dry. So we needed to make some changes. And one of those things that we decided to change was, well, in order to make better soil structure, we need to amend our soils and get our pH up to where it should be. The addition of the calcium will help the soil be better flocculated and just improve our structure. So will lime alone fix a broken soil and allow me to no-till again? No, but we got to start somewhere. And every soils manual I've ever picked up says start with your pH. So some of this has already been discussed by others, but with lime, we have kind of not a very mature market for lime. There's people around that will supply lime to me, but they're hundreds of miles away, and by the time I get it trucked in, it's very near unaffordable. So we evaluated a host of byproducts and different lime types. Fly ash has been discussed. We have actually quite a few quarries where we can get lime, but it's so coarse that maybe my kids' would get the use out of it. So it needs to be very fine. We need to have a high lime score in order for me to get a return on my investment. The sugar beet lime, that's always an option, and it's a fine product, but it's a long ways away from me. Hydrated lime is eventually what we decided on, and the fellow that was here earlier was discussing the hydrated lime that he used in his orchard, and that's essentially what we've done. We found an orphan pile through a fellow I work with who's sitting right there, Mr. Steve. So there was about 3,500 tons in Moses Lake. It had been sitting there for 10 or 15 years. It was in paper sacks. Sacks were all rotten, pallets were rotten, there was plastic intermingled. We scooped it all up with a front end loader, hauled it to Troy, and then we ran it through a trommel screen, and eventually that's what we spread. So there's our spreader. Neighbor owns that, uses it mostly for fertilizer, but we've been able to rent that from him and use it for our lime. It only covers about a 22-foot wide swath because we just can't get the lime to spread very well. And you can see in the background there's a telehandler there with a big materials bucket on it, and just a lot of product to move. So we've probably done about 2,000 tons to date, and it's not something we're going to be ending, but we're going forward at a less vigorous pace now. So we decided to start out, we wanted to really see what would happen if we amended soil up to a 6.5 pH. So we took a 57-acre field, gridded it out on 1-acre grids, approached it that way. The rates varied quite a lot, and it was interesting to see, we'd been variable rate applying fertilizer for quite a long time, and I expected to see something that would fit the crop production. There was some correlation, but it wasn't great. And I'll show you what I mean here. So this is the results of our 1-acre grids. You can see these are the low areas. These are the higher pH areas. Our highest yielding areas in this field are right here and right in here. It's also our lowest pH, and it's also the highest elevation we have. So what I finally decided the deal is that we have such a much higher organic matter in those areas that the organic matter is able to buffer and allow that crop to thrive. And there's probably hydrological issues going on there as well. So this right here is our grain harvest maps. You can see how that correlation, the best areas, and if we go back, you can see that's also where our lowest pH was. So this was our fertilizer or our liming prescription. And I doubt you can read these letters or these numbers down here, but our high rate right here was 7,500 pounds an acre. Our low rate was over 4,000 pounds an acre. What I would tell you is unless you intend to apply more than 4,000 pounds an acre, there's absolutely no point in variable rating. I think my approach, if I intended to variable rate at some point, would be to go out and apply my blanket rate of 4,000 pounds, let it sit for 4 or 5 years, let it equalize, go back, resample, and then get everything up to 6.5. So today we've applied about at least a ton. Most of our ground has seen 2 to 3 tons an acre that we own, and we're starting to apply on lease land. That's a conundrum in itself. In the Midwest, I have relatives that farm in Iowa. They buy ag lime for $20 to $30 a ton applied, and the landlord pays for it. The farmer pays for the application. I don't know what we're going to do here. It's a little different deal. If the farmer's going to pay for it, we better have a darn long lease. Some of my fields, actually a lot of my fields, especially the ones where we applied a higher rate, the pH is still rising as that becomes part of the active soil solution. So no, I'm not a very good scientist. I don't have replicated plot studies to tell you exactly what the quantifiable benefits were, but I can tell you that my crop production has improved. Even on the wheat, we're not supposed to see an increase in our wheat production. Well, we have, and I use that because wheat is the crop that we grow all the time, no matter what. And so I have really good records on what my wheat has yielded. And we've seen about a 15% increase since we started in 2014. And there's a lot of reasons that may be unrelated to the lime. Maybe we have some better varieties. I know we do. But the lime has to be in that equation somewhere. I can tell by walking over some of my soils that our soil tilth has improved. The field that we did the variable rate liming on, it used to be just like concrete in August. There was no way a root was getting through that stuff. And that's why our spring crop was hurting so bad. And today, just walking over it, I can tell it's softer and things are just working better. One thing that was most interesting to me was within a year, I saw an immediate reduction, a significant reduction in the aluminum. And so that's got to be good. The other thing we need to think about is The plant use efficiency of our nutrients has to be improved based on a lot of science. And then I feel like we're seeing less disease pressure. Got any questions? Yes?
So in the Midwest, what's that land being leased for? What's the lease rate versus the...
We're wondering what the lease rate was in Midwest. This would be Southwest Iowa farm ground. I can't say for certain, but it's, $200-300 an acre, and the landlord is paying for the lime application.
So the lime application is how much then?
Like $30 a ton. And I see one of the problems I see, just looking at my landlords, is that it used to be you leased your land from the neighbor who's retired and he used to farm. He cared about what was going on. Well, now we're getting to where we're 2-3 generations removed from actually being on the farm. And so you approach them and want to spend $80 an acre in applying lime. I can tell you where that conversation is going to end. Yes, sir.
So on your phosphate, have you noticed as far as increase in your plants as far as on that end? Kind of showing here on all these slides you showed as far as what your pH starts getting higher, your phosphate starts a little bit better.
Well, I have to admit that I've always been a phosphate over-applier. So I just felt like my crops have always responded to it. And I don't know. Yeah, Eric?
Question for you, Josh, and for Seth. Yesterday with the soil health meeting we had here, and talking a lot about cover crops, and I didn't know if you or Seth had tried using cover crops in order to try to mend your pH, bring bases up from down lower in the soil profile, getting the microbial activity going again, trying to tackle pH through that route.
I wouldn't say I've used cover crops to tackle pH directly. We have mid-messing with cover crops for 5-6 years in different ways. I'm frustrated with cover crops because I can't seem to quantify an additional level of profitability. If I plant a cover crop, it almost has to displace a crop year. And for me in an annual cropping situation, that's really tough to do. If we go out after, say following winter wheat and try to plant a cover crop, if we get a rain, that's an if we get a rain, it might get to where it's 2 inches tall and then it'll get frosted out. And so we tried some different things, but yeah, short answer is no.
I agree with everything you said. We tried. That was the big craze, right? And you can't read a no-till magazine without, it's just cover crop. Josh hit it exactly on the head. Can't get it up in the fall, so if you're going to do it, you're going to donate the entire crop year, which of course, it's the second coming of Christ itself is cover crop, so let's go do it anyway and give up a whole year. We did 7-way mix, arugula and radish and this and foo-foo grass and a bunch of everything, and did it right behind my house, and it grew awesome turnips down at the bottom, and didn't do a damn thing. Yes, no doubt. But and I don't mean it sounds so pessimistic. I believe in it wholeheartedly. I just, in my personal opinion, we're on the other side of the pendulum, right? I mean, we're talking about fixing dysfunctional, non-productive ground. That's the next step is CRP. Whereas, a lot of the cover crop success we see is, your $300 an acre Iowa ground, all right? And they're coming in with crops and boosting up soil that's already on the other side of the pendulum. And so, will it work? Yeah, but I think we have to repair it first.
So on our plots, so last application was 2016. So there were control, 1 ton, 2.5, 3.5 tons. Lime recommendation was 8 tons per acre, that particular field. And we saw, and I don't know, I'm just starting out on cell structure because in Europe that's one of the main issues. The health and liming is their main criteria, including organic matter. I found on these little plots we did, they're on several acres. But the soil PSI went down 15% since 2016. And then gradually, so there was a very, very clear indication that the amount of lime had an impact on. So for Europe, they classified their soils now in pH and base saturation. And if pH is around 4.5 to 5, they allow no more fertilizers. Just have to put lime first, then to clear up soil structure, and then with that, nutrient availability. So soil structure is a very, very big topic in Europe.
I had another question. Mr. Schwartz?
Have you looked at magnesium as far as, because it also change pH and it kind of over timber soils and like sometimes low. Have you looked at that at all?
Yeah, a little bit. We are slightly deficient in magnesium, and so my preferred lime source would be dolomite, but without spending an arm and a leg, I haven't been able to find that. And I think, our base saturation, if we go out and apply 8,000 pounds of lime, it's going to change our base saturation percentages, so you're going to have to reevaluate once you do that. And so that comes into play there.
Give a round of applause for all of our speakers today.
Thank you.